Mrs. Whitford, I'm sorry, but I saw this and I haven't been able to sleep. The photographer's trembling voice came through the phone. On my computer screen, she zoomed in on a photo from my daughter's wedding, and instantly, my blood pressure seemed to drop into a void. In the frame, my daughter's newlywed husband was pressing a red-haired woman against a wall, his hand wrapped around her back, their lips touching as if they had never belonged to Jacqueline. The worst part, the photo was taken exactly 2 hours before the ceremony. I collapsed into my chair, my breathing scattered. But then a cold thought slipped in. If this was real, then everything that had happened over the past 3 months, from the strange money requests to my younger daughter's disrespect, carried a very familiar scent: manipulation. And I realized this battle had only just begun. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like, so it can reach even further. I sat frozen in my familiar workspace, the room filled with the scent of pine and varnish, the place where I'd spent decades building our small family woodworking shop in Scottsdale. Yet Marcy Donalds' voice still echoed in my ears like a final alarm before disaster. I was 68, widowed for 8 years, believing my life, though lonely, was at least stable, until an unknown number called and pulled me into a storm I never imagined. "You need to come to my studio as soon as possible. Alone," Marcy said. "Please don't tell Jackie, not yet." That one sentence sent a chill straight down my spine. My eldest daughter, Jacqueline Whitford, or Jackie as people called her, had been married only 3 weeks. A grand wedding at a resort in Fountain Hills, where I'd spent almost $70,000 just to see my daughter happy, stepping into a new life with the man she believed was right, Daniel Foster, a polished, soft-spoken financial specialist who seemed so genuine even I told myself more than once, she found the right one. But I no longer trusted the things I told myself. Ever since Jackie's wedding, I'd noticed small but heavy changes. She visited less, but every visit came with money requests. The way she spoke, the way her eyes scanned my house as if evaluating assets, it all unsettled me, though I ignored it. Who wants to think poorly of their own child? And then, this morning, Marcy's call ripped the last veil away. I shut my laptop, trying to stand, but my legs felt like they no longer belonged to me. I braced against the table, feeling as if all the air had been pulled out of the room. I exhaled shakily, and from the living room, Lily's voice struck me like a slap. "Mom, where's your credit card? I need to put down a deposit to fix Brandon's car." I closed my eyes. Since Lily and her boyfriend, Brandon, had moved in temporarily, I thought I was helping her through a rough patch after losing her job. But temporarily had stretched into 4 years. Brandon lay around the house like he owned it, and Lily needed a few $100s from me every week for one reason or another. I stepped out of my workspace, already exhausted before speaking. "Lily, I'm busy. We'll talk later." "Later? You're always later." "I already told you Brandon's car broke down, or do you want me to be embarrassed out there on the street?" She said, embarrassed, as if I were the reason she was ashamed, not the 35-year-old man refusing to get a job. I didn't answer. I walked straight to the kitchen for a glass of water, hiding the tremble in my hands. Then Marcy texted, "Mrs. Whitford, I'm really worried about you. Please come see me tomorrow morning. I'll explain everything clearly." I set the phone down, feeling my heartbeat in a hollow space inside my chest. I didn't know what scared me more, the truth hiding in that photograph or the idea of having to tell my daughter. That evening, after a dinner, Lily and Brandon didn't bother to clean up. The doorbell rang. Jackie stepped inside, perfect as always. Cream blazer, expensive handbag, golden hair curled neatly. "Hi, Mom." She kissed my cheek, then sat on the sofa. "Daniel and I want to buy a house, a place in North Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, pool, great view. We just need you to help with $40,000 for the down payment." Just need you to help. She said it as if I were financially responsible for her marriage, as if the nearly $70,000 I had spent on the wedding wasn't a big deal, as if being widowed and running the woodworking shop alone for 8 years was invisible. I asked softly, "You need it that urgently?" Jackie looked at me as though my question was the unreasonable part. "Of course, Mom. The market's hot. Daniel and I have seen that house 3 times already. I'm telling you tonight because I know you'll help. You always do." I looked into her eyes and realized her smile didn't reach them. It was the smile of someone used to being given what they wanted, someone used to taking without offering anything in return. I nodded, neither agreeing nor refusing. She hugged me, a cold hug, then left. The headlights of her Mercedes swept across the living room window before disappearing, leaving the house in darkness. I stood still for a moment, then turned toward the kitchen. Dirty dishes, pizza boxes on the table, Brandon's shoes in the middle of the floor. I no longer felt like the homeowner, but like a resource for the selfish adults I had raised. I returned to my workspace, shut the door, and sighed deeply. The pine wall I had built myself last year felt like it was closing in on me. The darkness outside the window blended with the darkness inside me, and for the first time I wondered, how long has it been since I lived for myself? That night, I reopened Marcy's message, staring at the last line. "I believe you need to know." I was a strong woman, but my eyes stung so sharply I covered them with my hand. Not because I feared the truth in the photo, but because if this was real, my entire family had been built on a lie, a very expensive lie. I sat at the edge of my bed, my hand still shaking. I thought of my husband, Jonathan, and wondered what he would do. He always taught me to trust myself, even when trust in others became difficult. And in that moment, I knew Jonathan would never want me to close my eyes and let this slide. I lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. I heard Lily and Brandon laughing loudly in the living room, every burst of laughter stabbing through my thoughts each time I closed my eyes. I felt like I was living with strangers. By 3 a.m., I was still awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering into the darkness. If this is real, Eleanor, you need to prepare for the worst. And I knew. Tomorrow morning, I would meet Marcy Donalds. No matter how cruel the truth might be, I had no way back now. I had to face it. I had to know why the man my daughter married had embraced another woman just 2 hours before his vows. And more importantly, I had to know when my family had drifted so far from love and whether I had the strength to pull myself out of the wreckage. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The Scottsdale sky was barely light, a pale blue veil over the distant McDowell Mountains. I tried to sip coffee, but the familiar smell did nothing to soothe the dull ache behind my eyes. I inhaled deeply, slipped on an old cardigan, and walked to my car. The drive to Marcy's studio felt longer than usual, maybe because I saw everything through the fog of my own dread. Her studio sat in the quiet arts district, a red brick building with large glass windows. I stood at the door for a few seconds, gripping my purse strap before pushing it open. The bell chimed softly, and Marcy appeared immediately. Her face was pale, her eyes apologetic. "Mrs. Whitford, thank you for coming. she said in a hoarse whisper. I nodded, afraid my voice would crack if I spoke. She led me through the small gallery into the editing room where a large monitor waited. Wedding photos I once admired now weighed heavily on my chest. Marcy sat, her hands trembling slightly as she moved the mouse. I need to say this first. I didn't go looking for these. I was adjusting lighting to finalize the album, but when I saw them, she stopped, inhaled shakily. Seconds later, the photo I'd seen the night before appeared again, sharper now, undeniable. Every detail of Daniel's face, every finger pressing into that woman's waist, the way her red hair lifted in the breeze, their expressions so familiar, so intimate. I swallowed hard. Could you zoom in again? She did, and when the image filled the screen, I saw the slim diamond wedding band on the woman's ring finger. A wedding ring. That realization forced me to sit. I don't know who she is, Marcy whispered. I checked the guest list. No one matches her. I steadied my voice. And the timestamp? She pulled up the metadata. Date, hour, GPS. Everything aligned perfectly with the venue. I didn't understand all the technical language, but the data was clear. Numbers don't lie. 2 hours before the ceremony, I repeated, the words like stones in my mouth. Marcy nodded. I looked at the screen, but my mind drifted far away. Outside the room, I heard the city waking up, but everything felt muffled under the pounding of my heart. I remembered Daniel's warm smile, the vows he spoke. All of it now felt like a carefully crafted performance. Why? I whispered without meaning to. Why marry my daughter if... I couldn't finish. Marcy placed a small USB drive on the table. Everything is here. The photos, the data, everything I found. I don't know what you'll do next, but I thought you should have it. I picked it up. It weighed almost nothing, yet felt heavy enough to break my spine. Why are you helping me? I murmured. She touched my arm lightly. Because if I were the mother of the bride, I would want to know the truth. I couldn't recall how I left the studio. I only remembered sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel while sunlight pierced through the windshield, as if trying to expose the truth I wished I hadn't seen. I sat there for a long time until sweat dampened my palms. Driving home, Jackie's words from last night replayed in my head. You only need to help 40,000. You always take care of us. I had thought it was entitlement, but now, with the photos in my purse, the picture sharpened into something much darker. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just fake love. This was a plan executed with precision. The lavish wedding paid by me. The demand for cash gifts only, Daniel's flawless behavior, Jackie's sudden change after the wedding. Piece by piece, the puzzle formed the image I dreaded. Money. Nothing else was the motive. I remembered Jackie rising from the sofa the night before, tossing out, I told Daniel you'd agree. You always take care of us. Yes, I had taken care of them. I had raised them with every ounce of love I had. But somewhere along the way, they began seeing me as a resource, not a mother. A cold wave ran down my spine, not because of Daniel's infidelity, but because my own children had started tearing our family apart with their greed. When I reached home, I turned off the engine but stayed in the car. My house sat quietly under the Arizona sun, but I felt like I was staring at something rotten beneath its walls. Inside, Lily and Brandon were laughing as I walked in. Brandon's feet were propped on my table, and Lily was photographing a plate of food as though preparing for a magazine spread. Neither of them noticed my expression. Neither sensed that the truth in my purse could set this entire household on fire. I walked straight to my workspace and shut the door. I set the USB in the middle of my desk. Sunlight caught the metal surface, making it look like evidence in a crime investigation. I stared at it for a long moment, then leaned back. I'm not letting them take another dollar from me. I spoke aloud, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. The sentence wasn't fueled by anger. It was shaped by pain, humiliation, and the realization that being used by the people I loved had hollowed me out for years. I didn't yet know exactly what to do next, but I knew I would never again let anyone, child or not, treat my life as their bank account. I closed my eyes, imagining the road ahead, consulting a lawyer, reviewing all my assets, preparing to confront Jackie, reclaiming my home from Lily and Brandon. But before all that, I needed one thing. I needed to be strong. No more soft Eleanor. No more mother who always yielded. No more woman who let people take advantage. When I opened my eyes, the sun had risen higher, washing my desk in light. I stood, walked to the door, and placed my hand on the cool metal knob. A new chapter of my life was waiting, one I had never planned, never wanted, but now had no choice but to write. And I would write it. For myself, for the truth. For the years of life I refused to give away to lies. I inhaled deeply and whispered to myself, "All right, Eleanor, time to move forward." I stood there for a long time, knowing that turning this doorknob meant my old life would crumble behind me, revealing truths I wasn't ready to face. But then I flipped on the light, stepped inside, and closed the door behind me. My familiar space, the pine scent, the shelves I built myself, the warm glow from my lamp, suddenly felt like a place I no longer belonged, as if I were a guest wandering through my own home. I set my purse down on the table and let myself fall into the chair, trying to breathe steadily to push away the tightness rising in my throat. But before I could gather myself, Brandon's voice boomed from outside, loud enough to shatter the fragile silence I was clinging to. "Eleanor, can you grab me a Coke?" His voice was low, commanding, like he was calling for a servant. I walked into the living room. Brandon was sprawled across the sofa, feet propped on the table, sneakers covered in dust. He didn't look at me, his eyes glued to the sports program on TV. His posture was no different from someone who owned the house. He acted as though he had long forgotten that he was merely my daughter's unemployed boyfriend, someone I had financially supported for 4 years. I kept my voice even. "Get it yourself, Brandon." He glanced at me, shrugged, and continued watching TV. Such a small gesture, yet it made me realize the last traces of respect had fallen away with time. Before I could return to my room, Lily called from upstairs, her voice sharp and irritated. "Mom, where's your credit card? I need to book a spa appointment." "This afternoon," I stopped. All day I had been trying to hide my pain, trying to stay calm, but Lily's demands for money pierced straight through the most vulnerable part of me. I didn't reply. I went back into my workspace and shut the door, this time harder. I sat down, opened a drawer, and pulled out the wedding folder I had kept since Jackie began planning. I once thought it was a cute keepsake. Flower quotes, the photography contract, venue fees. But today, they were no longer memories. They were evidence. I opened the expense sheet. The number appeared clearly, $68,000. All of it from me. Not partially, not shared, all. Back then, I told myself I was doing it for Jackie, hoping she'd have a perfect wedding. Now looking back, I wondered, had Jackie ever thought about lowering costs because of how hard I'd worked all these years? Or had she simply pushed everything to the highest tier to maximize my investment? I flipped to the page about wedding gifts. Jackie once told me, "Mom, everyone prefers cash now. It's so much more convenient. Physical gifts are just clutter." I had agreed without hesitation. But now, remembering that moment, a different layer of truth surfaced. Cash gifts mean easy to split, easy to hide, easy to turn into something else. My breath grew shallow as I recalled those thick envelopes left on the reception table, love offerings from my friends, colleagues, and family, perhaps becoming part of someone's plan. I wrote down the number. Wedding cash gifts, $47,000, most of it from people I had known for years. I wondered, did Daniel know this from the start? Was he the one who suggested cash only? Or was it Jackie? I didn't want to believe that. But the photos Marcy had shown me had ripped open a door of truth that I could no longer shut. I picked up a pen, my hand still trembling, and began writing every detail I remembered. The day Jackie insisted on cash gifts, the times Daniel praised me for being generous, how they talked about their financial future as if already calculated, the occasions Jackie dodged questions about their joint accounts. I didn't know why I was writing all of this, but something instinctive told me I needed to record every piece, as though, if I didn't, the fragments would vanish and I'd never be able to assemble the terrifying picture taking shape. The door creaked open. Lily walked in without knocking. "Mom, I called you and you didn't answer. What's wrong? Are you overthinking things again?" I looked up at her. Lily's expression was not concern. It was irritation that I hadn't answered her demands. She crossed her arms and sighed. "Mom, don't think too much. The older you get, the more paranoid you become. Life isn't that complicated." That sentence, simple, careless, and dismissive, cut deeper than anything else today. I looked at my younger daughter. The same, 34-year-old who once cried into my arms after her first breakup. The same girl who sat behind me during that long summer road trip across Arizona. The same child I held when she felt life was unfair, now standing in front of me, seeing her mother as an obstacle. It felt like something gripped my heart tightly. Not anger, but a sadness so sharp I couldn't breathe. Lily rolled her eyes. "I'm going to the spa. Brandon's hungry. Can you make him something?" She closed the door before I could answer. I sat still, my hand resting on the open page. The lines I had written blurred as my eyes burned. It took me several minutes to realize I was crying, not because of Daniel, not because of Jackie, but because of Lily, because my own daughter saw me as an ATM and a shadow easy to manipulate. I wiped my face, inhaled, and felt something small but powerful shift inside me. Something long buried began to rise. Self-protection. I wrote another line in my notebook. My daughter sees me as a tool. Her boyfriend treats my home as his own. That single line, though written as a note, felt like the first time I had called the truth by its real name. I could not stay silent forever. I could not keep closing my eyes. I could not let the rest of my years be used for purposes I never agreed to. That night, for the first time in years, I locked my bedroom door. Lily knocked a few times, calling my name, but I didn't open it. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, letting silence fill the room. I knew I had crossed an invisible boundary, the boundary between endurance and awakening. I whispered into the darkness, a quiet vow to myself. Enough. Eleanor won't stay silent anymore. And I knew everything would change from here. But I also knew it was what I needed to reclaim what was left of my peace. I thought I might sleep a little that night, after such a long day and discoveries that squeezed my heart until it hurt. But as I changed clothes and reached for the bedroom light switch, I heard Lily's voice coming from the living room. Her tone was bright and overly cheerful, completely different from the indifference she had shown me earlier. I froze, my hand still on the switch. A sharp instinct crawled up my spine. I needed to listen. I cracked the door open and stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet except for the warm light from the living room glowing onto the ceiling. Lily's voice echoed. She had put the call on speaker, as if the conversation needed no privacy, no consideration for anyone sharing the house. I stood on the stairs, hidden in the dark, heart pounding without knowing why. "Tell me again," Lily laughed, a sugary laugh with something sour underneath. "She's really gonna dump him? In 2 months?" Then Jackie's voice came through. Clear, cold, nothing like the girl who once held my hand running along Santa Monica Beach when she was 10. "Yeah, in 2 months it'll be done. Clean divorce, no. Drama. And we split the wedding gifts 60-40. I get the bigger share because Mom paid for the whole wedding." I gripped the wooden railing so hard that my fingertips went numb. My heart twisted, then dropped as if losing all warmth at once. Lily burst into laughter. Oh my God, she'd faint if she knew, but she won't. Mom's old, so easy to fool. The words old and easy to fool cut through me like a thin, cold blade. I stood frozen, my breath breaking in my chest. Not because Jackie was planning a divorce, not because they were dividing wedding gifts like loot, but because my daughter, the one I raised with everything I had, called me those words without hesitation or compassion. Jackie continued, her voice emotionless, like discussing a bargain item. "Once everything's done, I'll tell Mom I need to move out, start fresh after the heartbreak. She'll feel sorry for me and pay the down payment automatically. She always does." Lily chimed in immediately. "I'm doing the same thing with Mom. She's used to it. Yesterday I told her my car broke down and she's already thinking of buying me a new one. I just need to ask a few more times so she gets used to spending." I nearly lost my grip on the railing. I, who had raised both girls with money earned from sweat in our woodworking shop, had turned into a wallet they could manipulate and practice tactics on. Lily's voice rang out again. "Brandon says she's predictable. Say something sweet and she believes it. I mentioned wanting to go to the spa and she didn't even dare say no. That's what happens when you're old." My legs shook so hard I had to lean into the wall to stay upright. Not from insult, from clarity. Clarity that the people I loved had been treating my affection as something cheap. I steadied my breath, trying not to let a sob escape. Lily would hear it. She would know. Jackie spoke again. "Just make her think Daniel and I are genuinely happy. When the divorce happens, I'll play the betrayed wife. She'll blame him and open her wallet. The house deposit will take care of itself." Lily asked, curious. "What about Mom's trust? I heard old people change wills all the time." Jackie answered casually, "Who knows? But let's take advantage while she's still soft. Old people are all emotional." I heard chairs moving and more laughter. Bright, carefree laughter, as if they were enjoying a late-night comedy, unaware that every word was slicing my heart open. I backed away from the stairs step by step, like a ghost drifting through its own home. The house felt suffocating, the walls closing in. I retreated to my room and locked the door with trembling hands. Under the dim glow of the bedside lamp, I pressed my hand against my chest, feeling the uneven beats. Every emotional defense I had collapsed within minutes. What I heard wasn't just betrayal, it was a coordinated plan, calculated by the daughters I had poured the best years of my life into loving and protecting. I sat at the edge of my bed, not crying, not screaming. The pain was so deep that the tears felt trapped in my throat. I only felt cold, a coldness that seeped to the bone. I thought of Jackie as a child, her tiny hand gripping my shirt when she feared thunderstorms. I thought of Lily running into my arms, sobbing after her first fall. Those memories clashed violently with the present, two worlds that no longer touched. The maternal love inside me, always gentle, patient, forgiving, fractured like glass, struck with a hammer. I whispered to the empty room, my voice barely audible. How could you? But the question floated in the air, unanswered. I walked to my desk and looked at the open notebook with the list of suspicions I had started hours earlier. I added a new line, writing slowly, each stroke carving into my heart. They are not only using me, they are performing behind my back. Then a clear thought rose in my mind, bright as a lamp turning on in the dark. I cannot let this continue for even one more day. Facing two manipulative daughters and a deceitful man like Daniel would not be easy. But the truth I heard tonight had transformed my pain into resolve. If I didn't act now, if I kept softening, kept believing sweet, empty words, I would lose everything, including myself. I closed the notebook, breathed deeply to steady myself. And in that moment, I knew what I needed to do. Tomorrow, I would see a lawyer. I would no longer allow myself to be led around. I would no longer let the people I once loved control every breath of my remaining years. I turned off the light. The room fell into darkness, but in my heart, for the first time in a long while, a faint glow, small but unmistakable, began to rise. Not hope, strength. A strength I never thought I still had after 68. And so, in the quiet of the night, I took my first step out of the hurt and onto the path where I would reclaim my life. I arrived at attorney Harold McIntyre's office the next morning, a mix of tension and determination churning inside me. The late June Scottsdale sun burned fiercely, its light shimmering against the pavement. I sat in my car for a moment, my hand resting on the steering wheel, feeling as if I were about to step into a confrontation I had never imagined facing. All my life, I had been the mediator, the peacemaker, the one who soothed family conflicts. But today, for the first time, I was here to declare something. I would protect myself. Harold's office was inside a quiet, elegant 3-story glass building. The sign reading Harold McIntyre, Family and Estate Law was mounted near the entrance, gold lettering on walnut. Inside, the soft scent of pine and fresh paper greeted me, reminding me of my late husband's workshop, where he once spent hours at the lathe. The memory nearly made me wobble. Harold stood as soon as his assistant led me into the IE conference room. He looked to be in his early 50s, salt and pepper hair, formal demeanor, but calm, respectful eyes, the kind that made people trust him without being told to. "Mrs. Whitford," he said, extending a hand, his deep voice steady. "Please have a seat. My assistant said you have an urgent matter?" I took a deep breath, set my bag on the glass table, then pulled out the USB Marcy had given me, along with the notebook filled with numbers, dates, and the conversations I'd heard the night before. "I need you to look at these," I said, hearing my own voice tremble slightly. I think my daughters are deceiving me, and my son-in-law too." Harold tilted his head, not surprised, simply turning on his computer and inserting the USB. When the photos appeared, Daniel holding the red-haired woman tightly, his hand tangled in her hair, he frowned and took precise notes. "Does this photo have metadata?" he asked. "Yes, the photographer verified everything for me." "Good, very good." What struck me was that he didn't react with shock or pity. He received everything with a cool professionalism, but not indifference. A part of me felt steadier. Clearly, this was not beyond his ability to handle. "And this," I said, opening the notebook to the page where I had written down the conversation between Lily and Jackie, my voice gradually more even, more solid, "is what I heard last night." Harold read without interrupting. He simply nodded a few times, as if each line was fitting into a picture he had already partly predicted. When I finished, he set the USB on the table and said, "Mrs. Eleanor, I want you to understand something clearly. This is no longer a normal family issue. This is deliberate financial exploitation." I leaned back. Hearing it spoken aloud by someone else made it real. It was no longer a passing nightmare. It was truth I couldn't deny. "Now," Harold continued, "I need you to provide everything you have. The photos, notes, wedding expense sheets, messages, anything at all." I handed everything to him. They spread across the large table, the evidence of 3 heartbreaking months I had endured in silence. Harold arranged them into sections, then looked straight at me. "First, let's talk about Lily and her boyfriend. How long have they lived in your home?" 4 years, I answered. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "And is there a lease agreement?" "No, just let them stay. I thought Lily needed support after her divorce." Harold nodded, then said something that made me sit upright. "In that case, under Arizona law, you can require them to leave within 30 days. No disputes, no lawsuits. They have no legal right to stay in your house." It felt like the floor lifted beneath me, carrying me toward a light I hadn't seen in months. Truly? I can do that? Completely legal. I looked down at my hands. They were shaking, not from fear, but from receiving back a power I thought I had lost. Harold went on, "As for your assets, I recommend establishing an irrevocable trust." I knew what a trust was, but not the details, so he explained, step by step. "A will can be contested," he said calmly. "Children can claim you were influenced, pressured, or not mentally sound." I flinched. Jackie had once remarked that older people change their wills often. Clearly, they had considered that angle. "But a trust," he said, resting his hand on the documents, "cannot be reclaimed, cannot be altered by anyone else, and most importantly, cannot be contested. Once assets are placed into a trust, they are nearly fully protected. You can still use them, still live in your home, still manage your money, but after you pass, no one can fight over or seize anything." I sat, stunned. A rare wave of relief washed through my chest. "So, they won't be able to take anything unless I want them to?" Harold smiled, softly but with certainty. "Exactly." For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in this battle. "I want to establish the trust," I said immediately, "as soon as possible. I don't want them touching anything ever again." Harold made notes quickly, then looked up. "But you must understand, this will make them furious." I met his eyes, calm, steady, unshaken. "They stopped being family," I said, my voice firm enough to surprise even me, "when they started treating me like a wallet." The air in the conference room went still. Harold nodded, not politely, but in acknowledgement of a strength he recognized. "Then let's begin," he said. I signed the legal agreement. The sound of the pen sliding across paper felt like a blade cutting through the invisible rope that had bound me for years, clean, final, freeing. When I stepped outside the office, the sun was still harsh, but it no longer blinded me. The hot wind blew against my face, but I felt lighter, as if I had just walked out of a dark room where I had been trapped for far too long. Standing beside my car, watching the glass buildings reflect the blinding sky, I thought, Eleanor Whitford has entered a new chapter. I am no longer the woman tossed around by circumstances. From today forward, I hold the wheel. Then I opened my car door, started the engine, and felt certainty settle into my bones. My counterattack, the counterattack of a mother long underestimated, had officially begun. I returned home late in the afternoon, carrying 2 thick yellow envelopes Harold had prepared. He emphasized that these were the first step in the legal process and that how I handed them over mattered less than my resolve, my refusal to yield to tears or rage from people who had thrived on my vulnerability. I sat in my car for a long moment, my hand on the steering wheel staring at the familiar house that suddenly felt foreign, as if it had witnessed far more than I was ready to accept. It had once held laughter, warm dinners, family photos tacked to the walls. Now it felt like a silent battlefield. I inhaled deeply, stepped out of the car, and walked up the stone path to the porch. The envelopes in my hand felt heavy as rocks, but also like shields protecting the rest of my life. Inside, as expected, Brandon was sprawled across the sofa, feet on the table as if it belonged to him. The TV blared a football game and a sweating beer can sat beside him. Lily lounged on the staircase, scrolling her phone, looking far too comfortable for someone living off another person for 4 years. I stood before them, didn't speak at first, and placed the 2 envelopes on the glass table. The soft slap they made was sharp as a blade. Brandon raised a brow, rude as ever. "What's this?" "Eviction notices," I said, my voice calm. So calm it startled even me. "You 2 have 30 days to leave my house." In that instant, the room froze. Brandon shot up from the sofa, face flushing red, veins rising in his neck. "Are you senile, old woman? This is Lily's family home. We've lived here 4 years. You can't just throw us out like dogs." Every word he spat hit the air, but none of it touched me. I'd heard worse. I'd endured more than enough disrespect to become immune. Lily burst into tears instantly, her sobs flowing with the precision of a rehearsed act. "Mom, how could you do this to me? You know I'm struggling. You know I'm just trying to get back on my feet after the divorce. Mom, you're so cruel." I looked at my daughter, the same one who had feverishly clung to me at 7 years old, the same girl with wide, innocent eyes who used to curl against me when the world felt unfair. Now she cried for money, not love. "Lily," I said slowly, "I heard everything last night. I know what you and Jackie are planning. I know you see me as a wallet, so you don't get to say I've betrayed anyone." Lily froze mid-sob, as if slapped. Brandon shot her a sharp look. Then, reflexively, Lily grabbed her phone and dialed. Jackie, listen. Mom's kicking us out. Something's wrong with her. She gave us these papers. It's like she wants us homeless." I stood with my arms crossed, hearing every word Jackie spoke on speaker. On the other end, Jackie's voice came through, angry but not surprised. "What? I'll be there. Don't say anything else. Let me and Daniel handle it." I pressed my lips together. Handle it. As if I were a malfunctioning appliance, not their mother. Brandon turned toward me, voice raised in threat. "You can't do this. We have rights. I swear. We'll sue. You'll regret this for the rest of your life." I didn't react, didn't argue, didn't shed a tear. I simply repeated the line I had practiced ever since I left Harold's office. "You 2 have 30 days, no more." The room vibrated with their outrage. Lily sobbed harder. Brandon kicked the table leg, knocking over a vase. water spilling onto the rug. I turned away and walked back to my workspace, locking the door, just as Harold advised. I heard Lily's sniffles, Brandon's curses, their frantic whispering. None of it hurt anymore. It only confirmed my decision was right. I opened my notebook and documented each behavior, each word, each reaction. Every detail mattered if they tried anything. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote, but not from fear, from the realization that I had stepped into a new version of myself, a woman who protected herself, a woman who no longer mistook silence for kindness, a woman who had endured enough to learn that gentleness is not weakness. When I finished the page, I looked up at the glass panel in my workspace. My reflection stared back, older, tired, but with eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen in years. I was in control. The feeling was so powerful I placed a hand over my chest to steady myself. And what Lily and Jackie didn't know, the truth I had no reason to tell them, was the most important thing of all. Every asset I owned, this house, the woodworking shop, savings, investments, everything had already been transferred into the trust. No one, not a single person could touch it. Not my daughters, not my son-in-law, not the freeloader in my living room. I closed the notebook and leaned back, filled with a strange calm. The battle had begun. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one pushed into the corner. I was the one stepping forward. I was the one holding the light. I was the one deciding. And silently, I made a promise no one else could hear. Eleanor Whitford will not let anyone take her life from her ever again. I knew from the moment I heard Jackie's car pull into the driveway that the evening wouldn't be just another family dinner. Not after everything that had happened, not after I handed the eviction notices to Lily and Brandon, and certainly not after the whispered schemes Jackie murmured on the phone, words that still felt carved into the walls of my mind. I stood in the kitchen, stirring a pot of sauce, the steam rising and fogging my glasses. I tried to keep everything steady, tried to ensure my hands didn't tremble, even though I knew tonight wasn't about the roasted chicken I was preparing. It was about the final confrontation between me and the daughters I once believed would never betray me. The door opened. Jackie stepped in first, polished as always, hair tied neatly, a stylish plaid jacket, a smile practiced to perfection, but I could see the urgency beneath her makeup. "Mom," Jackie said, as if a peaceful evening awaited us, "I brought fresh bread. We can have it with your dinner." Daniel followed her. His eyes slid past me quickly, then lingered on the living room, where Lily and Brandon sat with tense, hopeful faces, like drowning people clinging to one last life raft. It was clear. They had called Jackie obsessively, enough for her to bring Daniel along as some kind of rescue squad. I didn't hurry to speak. I set the pot down, turned off the stove, wiped my hands, and walked to the dining table I had prepared ahead of time. Everything was tidy and formal, like one final ritual before the truth shattered open. "Let's eat," I said softly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear in the silent house. Dinner began with small talk, Jackie asking about my health, Daniel asking about the woodworking shop, Lily pretending to choke up every time I looked her way, but only a few minutes later, their real purpose began to show. "Mom," Jackie said, setting her glass down, looking at me with an expression carefully crafted to appear thoughtful, "I think it's time you considered selling the house. You're living alone in a place this big. It's not suitable anymore." Daniel nodded as if he were some expert on my life. "Besides," he added, "if you sell now, you'll get a great price. You could move into a more comfortable apartment. We'll help you choose." The words came out like a caring suggestion, but they were sharp as a blade. I stayed silent, watching them. I didn't nod or shake my head. I just looked. That silence made both Jackie and Daniel waver slightly, and they kept pushing. And if you sell, Jackie continued, her voice smooth as if she'd rehearsed it all afternoon, you could help us with the down payment on a new house, so our family can stay close. I almost laughed. Before I could respond, Daniel leaned toward me, adding smoothly, either way. Later on, all your assets will go to the kids anyway. Why hold on to so much and stress yourself out? Stress myself out? What did he just say? I heard Lily softly murmur agreement, and Brandon smirked like this was all obvious. And then all the hurt, the collapse, the months of quiet suffering aligned into one straight, steady line running through me. I set my fork down. All right, I said. If you all want to talk seriously, then I have something serious to show you. I stood, walked to my office, and returned with the USB Marcy had given me, the one weapon I knew would tear every mask off the faces sitting around my table. I placed the USB in front of Jackie. Open it. Jackie looked at me, confused. Then she plugged it into her laptop and opened the photo folder. The room died instantly. The first picture, Daniel holding the red-haired woman, their lips almost touching, his hand behind her neck. The second, another angle even clearer, undeniable. The third, the woman's hand wearing a wedding ring. Jackie froze. Her face turned to stone, her lips trembling before going rigid. Daniel went pale, blinking rapidly as if the images might disappear if he denied them long enough. Lily covered her mouth. Brandon swore under his breath, unsure whether to look at me or at Daniel. I folded my arms, my voice calm to the point of cruelty. This is what happened 2 hours before the wedding. Full metadata, exact timestamp, GPS coordinates, real people, real events. Jackie inhaled sharply, choking on air. No way. Daniel, I say something. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again, his face twisting like someone gripping his throat. I straightened up and looked at each of them. We're not done, I said. Let me read the sentence you two said to each other last night. Lily shot to her feet, shouting, Mom, were you eavesdropping? No, I replied. I heard you. You had the speaker on. And I read, word for word. 2 more months and it's done. Smooth divorce. Wedding gift split 60-40. Mom's old. Easy to fool. No one breathed. No one blinked. Jackie stood so fast her chair crashed backward. Lily, you actually said that where Mom could hear you? Lily stammered. I didn't know Mom. Brandon cursed again, louder this time. I looked at them. 4 people. 4 faces exposing guilt and fear. A family I once thought I had, now reduced to a swamp where each one had tried to drag me under. I placed my hand on the table and said the line I had prepared exactly for this moment. I know you all see me as a wallet, but today, I'm informing you of one thing. 4 sets of eyes turned toward me. All of my assets, my house, my money, my shop, have been moved into a trust, and a trust cannot be sued, cannot be touched, cannot be broken. No one moved. I continued. Later on, by law, each of you will receive the minimum share, not 1 cent more. Jackie nearly collapsed back into her chair. Daniel gripped the edge of the table, white as a sheet. Lily began to cry. Brandon muttered curses, but his voice was shaking. I stood up. Dinner is over. I left behind a table full of cold food and 4 people watching their world collapse in an instant, like walls losing their foundation. I walked into the hallway, feeling as though I had stepped out of a room filled with toxic smoke. Behind me, I heard Jackie sobbing. Daniel mumbling something like an apology, Lily crying out in a mix of desperation and rage. But none of it touched me anymore. In that moment, I understood perfectly. My family didn't fall apart tonight. It fell apart long ago. Tonight. They simply saw what was left of it, clear and bare, like the truth I had laid on the table. The days after that fateful dinner, my house felt like a dying animal thrashing in chaos before it finally surrendered. Every wall, every door seemed to witness something I never imagined facing at 68. Psychological games from the very children I spent my life loving. Lily and Brandon behave like people with nothing left to lose, or who believed that if they pushed hard enough, I would break the way I always had. But they miscalculated. I was no longer the mother who could be manipulated by tears. I'm struggling, or empty promises of a future they never intended to honor. In the first 3 days, their strategy was clear. Noise, disruption, attempts to rattle me. In the morning when I came downstairs, Lily was blasting loud electronic music, making the dishes on the rack tremble. She'd never listened to that genre before, let alone blasted it inside a house with an elderly person. I brewed my coffee as if I heard nothing. Lily glanced at me, challenging. "Doesn't this bother you?" I simply replied, "No." Brandon slammed the door every time he went out, trying to shake the walls. Sometimes he left empty beer cans on the dining table and nudged them to fall, watching me like he was waiting for me to snap, but I said nothing. At night, they tried a different tactic. Lily tried frightening me, flicking hallway lights on and off when I walked through, cracking my door open, then closing it, or sitting in the dark living room whispering things like, "Being alone at your age. Dangerous things can happen." I knew the game. Harold warned me. When exploiters lose control, they will do anything to regain it. Still, I stayed silent. One night, near midnight, Lily stood outside my office door, voice trembling as if she were truly heartbroken. "Mom, I'm sorry, I really am. I don't know what Jackie told you, but I was wrong. Brandon, he controls me. I don't want this." I remained at my desk, pen moving across the page just as Harold instructed. I let her finish, then opened the door. She was crying. Real tears or a perfect imitation. But I'd been Lily's mother her whole life. I knew her inside and out. "What do you want?" I asked. Lily blinked, hesitated only a second. If you give me more time or help with the deposit on a new place, I promise." That was when I cut her off, my voice steady enough to surprise even me. "If you were truly sorry, you would apologize without asking for anything." Lily froze for 2 seconds. Then her face changed entirely, the mask falling like shattered glass. "Fine," she yelled. "Then stay here alone. Brandon's right, you're selfish. Don't blame anyone later." She stormed upstairs, each step pounding with rage. I returned to my desk and wrote, "Day 4. Lily shifted from remorse, request money, anger. Failed. Brandon was different. He didn't plead, he threatened. One afternoon, he stood in the kitchen with his arms crossed, blocking my path. "You know what people will say, right?" he growled. "They'll say you kicked your own daughter out. You think you'll live peacefully after that?" I didn't answer. I stepped aside. He mirrored me. I stepped the other way. He blocked again. I met his eyes, my voice firm. "Whether I live peacefully or not is none of your concern." He clenched his jaw, but this time he backed away. Every detail I recorded. Harold said it was vital if they tried to flip the story, claim I was unstable or abusive. I never imagined my daughter and the man she dragged into my home would stoop so low, but that was before I learned the truth. The low point of their desperation came when Jackie sent a text first. "Mom, I'm bringing someone to help you. You're not well. You need an evaluation." Before I could reply, the doorbell rang. A woman in her 50s stood outside, wearing a psychologist's badge, with Jackie beside her. Her face a mix of concern and superiority, like someone preparing to intervene in another person's life, while believing it's for their own good. "Hi, Mom," Jackie said gently, as if she hadn't been exposed with infidelity the night before. "This is Dr. Monroe. I think you're under a lot of stress and need—" I cut her off. "No." Dr. Monroe smiled professionally. "Mrs. Whitford, we only want to determine whether—" "I did not invite you into my home," I said, staring directly at her. "Please leave." Jackie flushed. "You're not acting rational. We just want to make sure you're capable." I opened the door wider, my voice icy. "If you are not off my porch in 3 seconds, I will call the police and report trespassing." Both women froze. Then Dr. Monroe stepped back. Jackie stiffened, saying nothing. I closed the door, not harshly but decisively. In the silence of the house, I heard Lily whisper from the stairs. "What happened? She kicked you out." Jackie hissed back. "Fine, let her destroy herself. Just watch." They left. And for the first time in months, hearing my daughter's voice didn't frighten me. It didn't hurt. It just felt empty, followed by a strange, unexpected sense of relief. In the days that followed, things in the house began breaking in suspicious ways. A picture frame fell. A doorknob was twisted out of alignment. A ceramic vase I had bought 20 years ago was smashed. But instead of getting angry, I picked up my phone, photographed each item, and saved everything into the folder labeled Legal Documents Section B. Every time I pressed the shutter, I felt a little stronger, because I was no longer fighting with emotion. I was fighting with clarity. On the 10th day of the eviction notice, Lily and Brandon finally began packing boxes. Their arguments echoed through the house. Blame, frustration, fear. Lily cried, then screamed. Brandon cursed and pounded on the walls, the thuds shaking the plaster but never breaking the calm I was building for myself inside my office. I closed the door, sat at my desk, turned on the warm lamp, and opened my notebook. New lines flowed steadily across the page. 10th day. They know I've changed. No more negotiating, no more hesitation, no room left for pity that can be exploited. I set my pen down and leaned back. For the first time in many years, I felt serene. Strangely, that serenity came from the deepest place of pain, yet it was also where strength was born. I had exhausted myself by loving the wrong way. Now I was learning to love the right person, myself, and my family, the ones who thought I would endure forever, finally understood. Eleanor Whitford would not be silent anymore, and if I ever chose silence again, it would be a weapon, not a weakness. The 30th day arrived as softly as a breath, yet as heavy as a stone on my chest, not because I was afraid or unsure, but because it was the day I would watch a rotten chapter of my life finally close. I woke at 6 a.m. to the Arizona sunlight slipping through the blinds, painting thin golden stripes across the wooden floor. Today, the house would change. Today, I would change. I made my coffee and set the cup on the table in silence. There were no pounding footsteps on the stairs, no fights erupting in the living room, no beer cans rolling across the floor. It felt like the quiet before a storm, except I no longer feared storms. At exactly 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Harold standing there, immaculate as always, holding a stack of documents. Beside him were 2 Scottsdale police officers, a man around 40, and a woman whose stern eyes softened when she met mine. "Mrs. Whitford," Harold said, "I'll be with you through the entire process. Everything is within the law. No one will give you trouble again." I nodded. In that moment, I felt like two solid walls had risen behind me. We stepped inside. Lily and Brandon had no idea the police were coming. Lily was sprawled on the sofa, hair messy, phone in hand. Brandon was still asleep, crumpled in a blanket like a lazy child. When they saw the officers, Lily shot upright as if doused with cold water. "What is this?" she screamed. Brandon jerked awake, eyes wide, panic flashing into anger in a heartbeat. "What the hell is going on?" The lead officer spoke in a firm but professional tone. "Today is day 30 since the eviction notice was delivered. You both have 2 hours to pack your belongings and leave this property." The room exploded instantly. Lily shrieked, "No, no, no! Mom, you can't do this to me! This is my home! I've lived here for 4 years!" The officer repeated calmly, "There is no rental agreement. This is the homeowner's legal right," and Mrs. Whitford followed every required step. Brandon lunged toward me, pointing a finger in my face. "You're insane! You'll regret this! You think this is right?" Harold stepped forward like a quiet shield. "If you continue threatening her, we are authorized to restrain you." Brandon backed up, still cursing, kicking the wall hard enough to knock plaster loose. Lily collapsed on the couch, sobbing, "Mom, please, I'm not ready. I have nowhere to go." I stood there looking at my daughter, the same child who once held my hand when she feared the dark, the same child who slept on my chest as a baby. But I didn't see that little girl anymore. I saw a woman who had learned to survive through manipulation, draining the mother who gave her everything. "Why are you doing this?" Lily wailed. "Why are you throwing your daughter out?" I inhaled slowly. My heart didn't hurt the way it used to. Now there was only clarity. "Because you threw me out of your heart first," I said, "and I cannot live with people who see me as a wallet." Lily broke into harder sobs, but I didn't move. The officers started the timer. 2 hours. 2 short hours that felt like a lifetime to Lily and Brandon. They ran upstairs, dragging suitcases down, clothes spilling everywhere, shouting at each other. Lily accusing me of cruelty, Brandon pounding on furniture, Lily screaming that I was heartless and ungrateful and not a real mother. I stood in the kitchen, holding my coffee, looking out into the backyard, the same yard where Jackie used to play ball, where my old dog slept in the shade, where I'd once planted flowers with my husband. Now it bore witness to a painful but necessary cleansing. I wasn't happy, but I was relieved. Relieved like someone taking off a heavy, suffocating armor they had been forced to wear for 4 years. 2 hours passed. Lily and Brandon came down the stairs with the last of their boxes. Lily's eyes were swollen, mascara streaked across her cheeks. Brandon was trembling with anger. They walked out to the porch and loaded their belongings into Brandon's old brown car. He slammed the trunk hard enough to shake the frame. Lily turned back, hatred and hurt mixing in her eyes. "You're going to live alone for the rest of your life," she said, her voice cracked and venomous. I stood tall, no tears, no trembling. "Better alone," I replied, "than surrounded by people who only use me." Lily yanked the car door open. Brandon started the engine. The old vehicle rumbled out of the driveway and disappeared behind the trees. The officers thanked me and left. Harold shook my hand, firm, steady. "You did the right thing, Eleanor. I'm proud of you." When the door closed, a silence unlike anything I'd heard in years washed over the house. A silence so deep I could hear my own breath. A silence So complete, the ticking clock sounded alive. A silence that finally let me realize this was the first time in 4 years I had the right to peace. I walked to the living room chair, the one I never dared sit in because Brandon claimed it as his spot, and sat down. My face felt cold. My back ached. Then, the tears came. Not because I had lost my children, not because I was hurt, not because I was lonely, but because after 4 years, after dozens of sleepless nights, after having my heart squeezed by betrayal over and over, I finally felt myself return. I had found my way back to who I was. I had chosen myself, and it was the best choice I had ever made. One quiet morning, as I was brewing chamomile tea to start my day, the phone rang. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, painting soft stripes across the walnut countertop I loved so much. Everything felt peaceful, so when the phone buzzed, I sensed the stillness was about to be disturbed. The caller ID read, Jackie. I stared at it for a long moment before answering. Not out of fear, because I had broken the habit of rushing in to comfort her every time she was upset. I wanted to respond with the calm I had fought so hard to earn. "When will you stop destroying my family?" Jackie said. No greeting, no breath, just an attack as if I were the cause of every misery in her life. I sat down, hands wrapped around the warm cup. My voice was soft, steady. "Jackie, I'm not destroying your family. I'm simply refusing to let it destroy me." Silence, a few seconds long. I could practically hear Jackie's angry breathing, as if my words wounded her more than anything else could. Then her voice cracked, furious, desperate. "If you hadn't interfered, if you hadn't blown up everything with Daniel, none of this would have happened." I closed my eyes, recalling the photos Marcy had given me, the messages Lily overheard, the months of Jackie letting me pay for everything, every bill, every debt, every mistake. "No, Jackie," I said. "Your marriage fell apart because you and Daniel were using each other for money, not because of me. I wasn't the one cheating 2 hours before the wedding, and I wasn't the one calling me own mother easy to fool." She fell silent again, so long I thought she might have hung up. Then her voice returned, brittle as dry leaves. "You'll regret this, I swear." I simply answered, "I've regretted enough for the past 30 years, Jackie. Now it's time I choose for myself." I was the one who hung up, something I had never done before. A few days later, I was watering the lavender along the back porch when my phone pinged with a message. I wiped my hands and checked it. "Daniel Foster, if you stay quiet about the photos, I'll send you $10,000. I want this resolved fast." I stared at the text, not angry, not shocked, just amused. He thought my dignity, my self-respect, the betrayal of my daughter, his brazen infidelity right before the ceremony were worth $10,000? I pressed block without replying a single word. The phone went still again, as if it too felt relieved to cut off something toxic. Word about the divorce spread faster than I expected, not because I talked. I hadn't said a single thing to anyone. But people who live by deceit rarely keep secrets well, especially when their lives start breaking apart piece by piece. According to what Harold heard from a colleague who handled divorce cases, Jackie and Daniel's battle resembled a wildfire, furious, chaotic, consuming everything they had tried to build on lies. Jackie accused Daniel of infidelity. Daniel accused Jackie of hiding wedding money. They dragged each other between court and lawyers' offices like two drunk strangers fighting in the street. The wedding gifts, $47,000 from people who trusted them, evaporated like steam. It all turned into legal fees, court costs, investigative expenses, and other pointless attempts to prove the other one was worse. In the end, they were left with nothing but resentment and two empty skies. And I watched from afar, not bitter, not pleased, simply detached, as though I were watching a play that once threatened to drown me, but now I had stepped off the stage entirely. One evening, I sat on the porch with a light shawl over my shoulders, watching the sunset burn the sky orange. I turned on the warm lights along the stone path, lavender scent drifting in the breeze. For the first time in ages, I truly felt alive, not surviving, but living. I placed my hand over my chest, where my heart still beat steadily, strongly. I no longer felt heavy when thinking of Jackie. I no longer hurt when thinking of Lily. I no longer blamed myself for giving too much. I felt only one simple truth. Freedom is worth more than anything, more than expectations, more than the weight of motherhood, more than the fear of loneliness they used to control me. Freedom is knowing I don't owe my life to anyone. Freedom is standing up and walking out of the dark without waiting for someone to pull me. Freedom is choosing peace, choosing myself, choosing a path free of those who see me as property. And as the sky turned purple, I smiled. A real smile, one that made my eyes sting just a little. I had lost much, but I had found the most precious thing again, myself. Eleanor Whitford, a woman who finally understood that sacrifice is not destiny. It is a choice, and starting today, I choose freedom. 3 weeks passed after Lily and Brandon left the house, and what surprised me most wasn't their absence, but the absence of the noise they carried with them. The house was so spacious I could hear the wind slipping through the door frame, the wood expanding and contracting with the change in temperature, and even the echo of my own footsteps across the clean wooden floor. For 4 years, I hadn't realized how beautiful those sounds were, gentle, honest, and untouched by resentment, demands, or disrespect. I lived alone, and for the first time in my life, alone didn't mean lonely. The first morning after they left, I woke at 7 a.m., went down to the kitchen, and stood there for quite a while. The coffee machine Brandon had dropped countless times stood intact on the counter, gleaming under the sunlight. I placed a coffee pot in, pressed the button, and listened to the steady hum of the machine, without fearing someone would yank the plug or shout about needing the stove, or complain about anything except maybe that the coffee would brew, a little stronger than I liked. That small piece made me laugh, a real laugh, soft as smoke, one that felt like it had been asleep inside me for years. On the 3rd day, I took out the paintbrush set my husband had given me in 1985, a gift I had never truly used. Back then, life was too busy. Then came the children, then the store, then his illness. And I pushed my own interests aside as if they were luxuries I didn't deserve. I sat at the dining table, spread out the paper, set the palette. Sunlight passed through the window and shimmered across the watercolors like pieces of glass. For the first time in 4 decades, I dipped a brush into blue and touched it to paper. The first stroke trembled, the second steadied, the third, my mind finally let go. I painted the backyard, the lemon tree my husband planted when Jackie was born, the wooden chair where I used to read to Lily. Everything appeared imperfect, proportionally wrong, yet painfully true. When I finished, I didn't cry. I simply placed my hand over my heart and felt a gentle easing ripple outward like circles on water. I had returned to myself, the woman I was before I drowned under duty and endless sacrifice. A week later, I joined a woodworking repair class for older adults at the community center. I had always thought I only knew how to run a store, that working with tools was men's work. But standing before a piece of wood, holding a chisel, hearing fibers split under my hands, it made me feel stronger than I ever had. In the class was Margaret, 82, a cheerful widow who loved telling stories about her late husband. Philip, a veteran with slightly trembling hands but unwavering patience. And Laura, 50, newly divorced and learning how to begin again. I sat among them holding a light mallet and realized I wasn't lost. I wasn't left behind. I belonged here. None of them knew my story, and I didn't need to tell it. We shared through laughter, through borrowing sandpaper, through lifting each other up when a piece of wood broke the wrong way. That evening, I returned home with the scent of fresh lumber on my hands and a heart full of energy. In the second week, I decided to renovate the kitchen, a task I should have done long ago but kept postponing out of fear of inconveniencing the freeloaders living under my roof. I bought new wall cabinets, a power screwdriver, a measuring tape, and a roll of vinyl covering. The store clerk was shocked I intended to do it myself. It took me 2 days to remove the old cabinets, sand the surfaces, measure carefully, and install each unit. At times, I was so tired I had to sit on the floor, but the feeling of rebuilding my own home kept lifting me back to my feet. When I mounted the final cabinet, I leaned against the counter, sweat sliding down my temple, and thought, Eleanor, you were never old. You were just held down by people who dragged you under. In that moment, I felt young again, not in age, but in spirit. That weekend, Harold emailed, "Your trust is complete. Your assets are fully protected. No one can alter or dispute anything." I read those lines 3 times. Each time felt like placing another solid stone beneath the foundation of my new life. I no longer had to fear Jackie suing. I no longer had to fear Lily demanding a share of the house. I no longer had to fear Daniel returning with lies. I no longer had to fear losing everything I had spent my life building. I sat quietly, then burst into a long, clear laugh, the kind I couldn't remember producing in years. That afternoon, while I was sorting my paintbrushes, the phone rang. Marcy Donalds, the photographer who helped me see the truth. I answered. Her voice was warm, slightly hesitant. "Eleanor, I've been thinking about you these past weeks, wondering if you're all right. You said you'd check in. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I looked at the half-finished painting on my table, blue sky strokes and soft lavender. I smiled. "I'm all right, Marcy. Actually, I'm better than ever." She exhaled in relief. "I'm so glad to hear that." I picked up my car keys. "Marcy," I said, my voice carrying a sincerity even I could recognize as new. "I owe you a thank you. You helped me escape a life that was going in the wrong direction. Are you free for coffee? My treat." On the other end, she laughed, simple and warm as late afternoon sunlight. "I'd love that." I hung up. I looked around my house, for the first time completely mine. I looked at my life, for the first time completely my own. I grabbed my purse, stepped outside, and took a deep, full breath. Freedom isn't just the absence of chains. Freedom is when your heart feels light enough to lift. And I, Eleanor Whitford, was beginning to lift. I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, adjusting the thin scarf around my shoulders, and for the first time in years, I saw no fear or exhaustion in my eyes. Instead, I saw clarity, ease, and something I thought I had lost: respect for myself. 3 months earlier, I had been a mother used, cornered, treated like a walking wallet. I endured, bent myself in half, convinced that was what a mother must do, that love meant unconditional sacrifice. But betrayal and cruelty from the very people I raised taught me a lesson I should have learned long ago. Love does not include allowing others to destroy you. Sacrifice is not a mother's destiny. Boundaries are part of love, not the opposite of it. When I drew my first boundary, I thought I would collapse. Instead, it held me up. I went from a woman trembling when her daughter mocked her, old and easy to fool, to the woman who stood tall at her doorway and said clearly, "You have 30 days to leave." I went from someone heartbroken by her son-in-law cheating on the wedding day, to someone who placed a USB on the table and revealed the truth without a hint of hesitation. I went from someone who believed life after 60 was nothing but waiting, to someone rewriting her life at 68, with new colors, new joy, and new self-respect. Looking back, I realized something important. I was never alone. There was Marcy, the woman who stayed up late to send me the photos that changed my life. There was Harold, the calm, persistent attorney who handed me the legal shield that protected my future. There were neighbors who left bread on my porch or asked if I needed help fixing a faucet. There were strangers who smiled when they saw me carrying a basket of flowers, as if they sensed the lighter steps beneath my feet. I once thought I was left with an empty house, but really, I had a small world full of quiet kindness, one I had been too drained to notice before. I slipped my purse over my shoulder. Inside were only my wallet, my phone, and the small notebook where I recorded my healing. I locked the door, stepped onto the porch, and when I opened the garage, the Scottsdale sunlight poured in, bright and pure. After many years, I was about to walk into my first coffee outing, not a tense family meeting, not a stressful appointment with a lawyer, but a simple, sincere invitation. A meeting to say thank you, a meeting to open the door to a new chapter. I looked up at the sky, wide and blue. White clouds drifted gently like clean pages, and the breeze carried the scent of desert dust and the lavender blooming at my doorstep. I smiled, a real smile rising from the deepest part of me. I whispered, "The rest of my life is mine, and no one else's." And I believed it with everything inside me. After more than 40 years of being a mother, a wife, a woman carrying the world for everyone else, I had forgotten something simple. I also deserved a life of my own. Today, at 68, I stepped into the sunlight with weightless feet, as if I had just been freed after years imprisoned by expectations and unspoken obligations. The Scottsdale sky was so blue it felt like I was staring at an unwritten map, not one to follow, but one I would draw myself. I closed the garage door, held the car keys, but paused for a few seconds just to breathe, not to gather courage, but to savor the rare feeling of full autonomy. A new chapter begins not with thunder or shouting or the crash of broken things, but with the soft sound of my own footsteps on the concrete, leading me to the place I should have reached long ago. I opened the car door. I stepped in. I smiled. A new life, unburdened, unblamed, free from the shadows of exploitation, was unfolding right before me, and I knew I was ready. Thank you for staying with me all the way to these final lines of my journey. If you're listening to my story, perhaps somewhere in your own life you've had a crossroads too, a moment when you had to stand up and protect yourself even while your heart was still bleeding. At any age, we all deserve peace, respect, and a life that belongs to us. I would love to know, where are you watching this from? Did any part of my journey remind you of your own or make you reflect on something in your past? Feel free to share in the comments. Your story might become the strength someone else needs to rise again. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, awakening boundaries, and rediscovering yourself after years of sacrifice, please like, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next stories. I'm truly grateful to have you here, because sometimes just one more person listening can make someone's whole world feel warmer.